Lesson 1. Why should you care about building an audience? Hi, I'm Phil Nottingham, the founder and CEO of Not Media. I've been working in marketing for the last 12 years and have been lucky enough to help some of the biggest and the smallest companies in the world transform their approach to brand marketing. In this course, I'm going to try and give you some of that knowledge. One of, if not the most important aspects of brand marketing in the modern world is audience building. In my view, it's the key thing that separates the really successful new brands from those that struggle to get purchase. And I see it as the main means of achieving competitive advantage without spending fortunes on Super Bowl ads and other very expensive media-driven creative campaigns. In this course, we are going to go through all the elements of audience building in some detail, so that at the end of it, you'll be able to construct a practical game plan for building an audience of your own, no matter what sort of business or organization you're working for. In this first lesson, we are going to cover off the why, which informs the rest of the course. Why should you care about building an audience? The first reason is competitive advantage in brand marketing. If we think about the way brands have been built historically, it's primarily been through various forms of advertising. Firstly, with print media and billboards, and then TV advertising in the 1960s, the essential problem of brand was a problem of messaging and reach. You needed to come up with the right message, the right story, and get it to the right people at the right time. The goal with brand marketing and brand advertising has and remains largely to tell a compelling story that connects your business to the needs of your target customer. But this has become less reliable and a less reliable strategy in recent years with the proliferation of digital advertising. The reason why digital has made brand advertising less of a surefire thing is for two reasons: the ability for us all to ignore ads and the increased competition. The ability to ignore ads has many forms. Not just physical ad blockers that prevent ads from appearing on our browser, but also mental blockers. We just simply don't pay attention to the ads because we see so many around the web all the time. So we've become adept at ignoring them and looking at the web without really paying attention to the ads that make up a huge part of it. On YouTube and Facebook, we usually ignore video ads that come up in front of us because we reach for that skip ad button. And because ad tolerance is so low and getting lower, the old idea of if you see something 7 times, you remember it, just simply doesn't apply anymore. We each see thousands of ads each day and barely remember any of them. With brand advertising, you are often aiming for love at first sight. You are hoping that somebody sees your ad and likes what they see very quickly and then stops to watch or read further, and eventually this cements a positive view of your business. Now, of course, this is not impossible to do, and many brands make a success of it every day, but it's very, very difficult and not the basis for reliably building up preference for your offering against your competitors. And of course, the more ads there are out there, because the barrier to entry is so low, it's cheap and it's easy for anyone to just advertise on any high-performing content on YouTube by buying the right advertising that's available. Because it's far more available than traditional TV shows, it means that anyone can start to compete. Now, this is not to say that digital advertising isn't useful or that it doesn't work, and we'll come on to some ways that it can be used very effectively later in the course. But rather, the principle is that you cannot get away with anything other than top quality creative if you want to build brand based on advertising. So most businesses investing in brand are investing a huge amount of money in advertising, which mostly equates to just giving money directly to Google and Facebook. And this essentially inflates the price of reaching people with a message. So most brand marketing becomes a question of who can spend the most and who can hire the best creative agencies, i.e. who has the biggest and deepest pockets to go for volume with the ads they're distributing. Brand marketing then all too often becomes a battle of who can spend the most and force their way to the largest share of mind through advertising. But we can do things differently. And this is because reach is essentially a solved problem. If we go back 30 odd years, one of the biggest challenges of branding was essentially reach. We had to get in front of the right people at the right time with the right message. And now the problem of the right time and the right people is essentially solved by technology, rather by Google and Facebook. Where once finding out how to get in front of the right people at the right time was a critical marketing discipline and half the battle in branding, now if you want to get in front of prospective customers, all you need to do is just give Google and Facebook your money and they'll do this for you. As we've discussed, in a world where there is no way of differentiating based on reach, everybody can pay Google and Facebook to get access to customers if they want to. You have to differentiate instead on message and the quality of the creative. But this is super hard. In a more diversified world where attention is the biggest commodity, you need to do more than just get in front of people. Because otherwise the challenge of getting in front of people is essentially a challenge of trying to stand out amongst the millions and millions of marketing messages that we all get every day. Of course, this is a very, very difficult game because you're not only up against those who you're competing against, those who are doing marketing similar to you, but also those companies that are creating just content as a product. Everyone who is creating content and trying to get attention with it. So you're up against Netflix, you're up against Disney, you're up against the New York Times. All this sounds really bleak, I know. But this is where audience building comes in as a discipline. It allows you to do something different to just trying to build brand through ads. So what do I mean by building an audience? Well, what I'm really talking about here is building a fan base. If we think about the goal of brand marketing more broadly, what is it that we are trying to achieve by investing in it? Ultimately, brand marketing is not about brand awareness per se, but about brand preference. We want people to choose to buy from us rather than our competitors. One way to achieve this is directly by increasing awareness, and this is where advertising plays in, such that when an individual has an essential need and begins to consider who might be able to fulfill it for them, they then think of your business first. But there is another way to compete for preference, and this is by becoming the business that individuals recommend to one another through word of mouth. To compete on word of mouth, you need to think just slightly differently. Instead of marketing only to your potential customers, you need to market instead to those people who speak to your potential customers, to their wider social circles, and build up affinity amongst that group, such that they naturally recommend you to others, even if they are not potential customers themselves. And this is why you need to build an audience for your brand. If you have a community of fans who actively engage with you, watch your content, share your stories, and then speak to others about you, you are going to create an implicit association and affinity, which eventually leads to higher brand preference and more sales. And it also makes all of the rest of your marketing much easier. It's the tide that raises all ships. If you have a community of superfans who want to have a direct relationship with your business, then launching products, running new PR campaigns, doing customer research, and much, much more becomes infinitely easier. When launching new products or campaigns, you have a seed set of fans who can kickstart your organic distribution and get your news in front of publications and influencers. If you need feedback on new ideas or to better understand the potential customer needs, you have a group you can quickly seek honest feedback from. If you're investing in a new social media series, you can guarantee some initial engagement, which provides social proof and helps you to reach new users. So audience building is really the new creative discipline that the smartest companies are using to differentiate themselves in the modern digital marketing landscape. It's new, it's different, and it really, really works. It is the process of developing a group of engaged fans distinct from your potential customers, people who really like your marketing and particularly go out of their way to engage with you. They may buy your products, they may be customers as well, but more critical is that they are part of your community and actively promote you to others. That may be engaging with you on your website, on your social channels, or on your email lists. But essentially they are your audience, the community that exists around your brand. This is different from just reaching to people who you want to sell to. Audience building is really the conscious elevation of brand marketing beyond customer acquisition. This is having a relationship with your audience broader than just your customer. So thinking about the audience, the group of people who you are speaking to, beyond just those you're trying to sell to. Now in this course, we are going to teach you how to identify the right audience and then give you all the information you need to go out there and craft a technical and creative strategy that cements your brand as their home on the internet. Okay, so I want to briefly touch on the key difference between audience building and customer acquisition. And I think this is incredibly important, especially for those of us with experience working in B2B lead nurturing or e-commerce conversion optimization. Generally speaking, most technical marketers and marketers more broadly spend most of our time thinking about customer acquisition. That is to say, we are trying to get people to our website or to our social media channels or wherever else in order to complete a form of conversion. This might be giving an email to become a lead, or putting an item in a shopping basket, or signing up for a free trial of a product. And there is a deep sense in which, through all of this, we are building an audience. We are typically building up a big database of contacts and potential customers, which we will then market to in the future. However, this is not what we mean when we talk about audience building from a brand marketing perspective. Although there is a lot of overlap in the tactics and the tools which we use in audience building and customer acquisition. The reasons these are different disciplines, both important ones, that need to work side by side with one another is that in order to build an audience, you need to be able to directly engage with the people who are not necessarily interested in becoming your customers themselves. It's very hard to build up an effective word of mouth and brand affinity strategy if you limit yourself to individuals who might buy from you. And therefore, audience building is a discipline of capturing interest from a group much broader than your target customers and generating a deep relationship with them through content and community. Your brand audience is different from your product audience. There is definite overlap, but the brand audience are the people who care about the same things that you care about, and the product audience are the people who you ultimately want to generate revenue from. And as you communicate with this brand audience, it is explicitly under the auspices that you are not trying to actively convert them into customers in the way that you are with your product audience. So we need to think slightly differently about what we are ultimately trying to get from this brand audience, and to truly understand what the value of brand is. If we consider that we have a brand audience of people that love us and a product audience of people who might buy from us, then there will be a great deal of crossover between the product audience and the brand audience. But there is also distinct buckets too. If we think about many companies that build brand based on aspirational products, this distinction can become more clear. So, for example, companies like Tesla, or even to an extent the likes of Nike and Adidas, have many more fans than they do customers. So many people would love to drive a Tesla, but can't afford one. And some of Tesla's best advocates have never even sat in a Tesla car. But they understand what the brand is for, and they would recommend it to their friends and relatives who are perhaps more likely to buy that product than the fans themselves. So part of word of mouth is positioning, but a lot of it is also about building an audience and how you create that community, that sense of shared purpose and experience and feeling around your brand. Essentially, to build an audience, you need to become the fulcrum for conversation. And that means thinking broader than your customer base. You're not just speaking with your customers. You're speaking with all the people who are part of that conversation, the conversation around the topic that you are passionate about and that you're solving for. So what that means is that you need to find a subculture or a community or an interest group of people who are likely to talk to one another and likely to become the engines of word of mouth for your brand. So as we start to go through this process, you'll see that we end up building a separate audience, which sits alongside our potential customers in our CRM and across our social channels. There is overlap, but through audience building, we are able to go broader and ultimately speak to more people than if we are just doing customer acquisition. We're now going to talk a little bit about measuring success. I think misunderstanding the principles of measuring brand is one of the big challenges where companies will fall down, because they will start to invest in building an audience, but will then end up implicitly considering the audience they are building as a lead generation tool. And this comes from either trying to directly measure return on investment in terms of revenue, or finding a proxy that is essentially as close to revenue as possible. And I think that's really the wrong way to think about audience building and brand marketing more broadly. The value of brand marketing can rarely, if ever, be measured in terms of actual incremental increase in revenue. And the problem with doing so is that you end up thinking that the investment itself has not been worthwhile because it doesn't look so good in terms of revenue generated. And then you eventually stop investing in it. Or the shift to strategy instead just becomes a direct customer acquisition play, which will then not be very effective as a means of brand marketing. Because as we will see, the way to really build an audience is not to try and sell them things. So instead of revenue with measuring success in audience building, the way to think about measuring is to come up with a reasonable proxy for value. And that value in brand is always some form of engagement. This might be about shares or likes on social media, but it might also be about content consumption. And it might be about driving people towards different levels of permission asset within your CRM system, getting them to give you more data about themselves and signing up for more and more of your content services. However, it's always the most accurate proxy to genuine engagement that we can get, rather than a metric which doesn't necessarily connect to the value being generated. In this case, share of mind. And share of mind means people spending more time with you. It means people investing more of their energy in engaging with what you have to offer. And this is because engagement ultimately drives a brand's preference, both through the strategies centered around advertising and those centered around audience building. The difficult thing to accept, particularly for businesses primarily investing in performance marketing, is that you can't tie things all the way back to revenue in the way that you would like, towards that holy grail that we've all sought of full funnel measurement. But the thing is, that's always been the truth about brand marketing. You've never been able to measure it in terms of revenue generated. And the moment you accept that and instead try to focus on other things is the moment you start to really build a good brand marketing strategy. So in this first lesson, we've touched on the importance and value of building an audience for brand salience. We've spoken about why this is a beneficial investment in marketing to get competitive advantage in a world where most businesses are only investing primarily in high-risk brand strategies like PR and advertising. We then looked at the difference between customer acquisition and audience building and started to think in terms of a bifurcated audience. A product audience who we sell to and a brand audience who we try to engage. We've explored how this differs from building up a database of leads and other funnel-centric forms of marketing. Lastly, we've just touched a bit on the principles of good brand measurement and made the point that you get what you measure. And you need to start to measure things that are not about revenue and more about engagement. The last lesson in this course will look a little bit in more detail about how to measure audience building and how to track the results over time. But for now, just bear in mind that we're doing something very different than the marketing which generates direct revenue. And as such, it can't be measured in that way. The slides and links to this lesson will give you a bit more detail on all of this and set you up to start learning about the first and most important step for audience building, which is finding a community or subculture to target. I look forward to speaking to you in lesson 2.